Morning. Morning, Nico. Morning, Rebecca. Okay. How's everyone going? Good. Let's go. Yeah. Sleepy. I hate 9 o'clock Monday morning. Okay. Can you everyone see my Scrum review slides?
Got you, Stu.
Oh, hey, Josh. Oh God, Josh. You've got a rep, Josh. All right, shall we start? Any questions about the test this week, mid-semester test? Or exam, depending on how you look at it? No questions? Yes, it will. Yeah, you definitely have to have this content as well. Weeks 1 to 5, exactly, Nico. Yep. How many questions are there? I think it's 15. 15 short answer questions. Don't stress. All right. I think I've written quite a lot on the website and also on the announcements page. Not quite. They can be between 1 and 4. Yep, Nico's got a question. That's it for the day. Yeah, you can take off. No, sorry, you have to stay. You probably have to stay, but we'll let you know in the exam. Yeah, it depends on the session, actually. All right. Like I said, 15 short answer questions. They'll be as highly tied to the workshops as I can make them. They'll generally ask some theoretical question, explain some concept, and then relate it to your workshop in most cases. What else is there? I think that's just the main thing. It's just 15 questions. Yep. You can type the answers with your laptop. Exactly. Yep. But you can only have that one single page open. That's it. Okay. If you don't have a laptop, I'll have some printed exams as well for people who like handwriting. You can bring a dictionary in with you. It's done inside the Moodle. No, sorry, Jack. It's probably a little too much. Yeah, I booked both the rooms on the ground floor of D building so that we could spread out. You'll have to show it to the tutor, Hong, about the dictionary. No, no, you can't do that. Normal class location. Yep. Normal class location. Yeah, Josh is impatient. He's heard this all before. All right. I think that's been asked and answered about 5 times, so I'll let you look that up, Car. Yes. So yeah, good question, Amy. Can you do those sketches before you go, because it'll save time when you get there. Gemma, that's above in the discussion. Same time as your usual class time. Okay, session 1 asked you to do some rough sketches of what you would have done. Thanks for reminding me about that, Amy. If you can do that, that would be great. I know I'm only getting about 1/3 of the students here, so. All right, shall we jump into it? Can you guys see the Scrum review page? Yep, cool. All right, so if we go right back to our first, we've actually worked our way through all these bits and pieces, haven't we? Yep. So we've done our product backlog. In fact, I imagine that most of you guys are sick to death of product backlog, right? Yep, I bet you are. Okay, so we've done that. We've done our sprint planning. We've done our sprint backlog, which is when we loaded it into the Kanban board. And working on the sprint as a team, which we sort of simulated. We've done, how many daily scrums have you done? 8 now? And I think you were doing them in Kirsten's or Kathy's course as well. So you've done daily scrums a lot now. So we've talked about a product increment. You'll concentrate on that a bit more in Andy's studio class. And what we're going to talk about today is this one here. We've done retrospectives to death. So we're really talking about the sprint review now. Is everyone okay with that? Cool. So the plan for this 5 weeks was to get you through all the bits and pieces of the Scrum process in roughly a reasonable order, so that when you went and did the project studio or your ICT project, you would actually have the all the set of skills that you need. All right, so sprint reviews. So it's a review of the sprint outcome. It really is primarily interested in the product increment. So what's the primary measure of success in Agile development? Anyone can remember that?
Working software.
Working software, so exactly. Or working product, to be fair to the networking guys, right? It might not be software, it might be a product, it might be a design, okay? Cool, all right. Really it's around talking to the customer client about what has been achieved, any concerns and any adjustments. And that's really what we're doing inside a sprint review. Is everyone okay with that? Yep. Okay, so what are we trying to do? We're trying to get people to ask questions, and mainly the client and the product owner ask questions of the development team, make observations about what they like and don't like about the product, which is basically providing feedback from the product owner and the clients, provide some suggestions around adjustments. Maybe the style's not quite what they're looking for example. And the last one's probably the most important, is discuss what the ground truth is now in the product. And do you know what ground truth means? It's essentially the measurable truth of the situation you're in it right now. Okay. And so between this sprint and the last sprint, things might have changed. Okay. So it could be that the market shifted, the client no longer is interested in the component, or they've changed what they need. So for example, in the last set of sessions, I threw that curveball at you when I changed the specs on you. So that would be a reflection of some change in the ground truth. Okay, is everyone okay with that? Cool. All right. So some questions you generally ask: what has been done? What has not been done? Right. So sometimes things don't get done in a sprint because something was not 100% accurate in the number of story points, for example, or your prediction of story points is not quite 100% yet. What work was brought in? So in other words, you may have finished the sprint early, and so what happens is sometimes you want to use all the time as efficiently as possible. If the whole team finishes early, what happens is you can go back to the product backlog and say, what else can we bring in to finish off? And later in the project, quite often you'll go pull technical debt in to fill in gaps like that so that you can catch up on stuff that's been done. Okay. And any work that's been taken out, you possibly might have been halfway through a sprint and you go, you know what, we don't need to do that. And you can pull that out. So that's the sort of questions that might be asked. Is everyone okay with that? Double check I'm recording this. I think I am. Yep. Okay. All right. Whoops. What the hell happened there? I think I accidentally just inserted a slide. When is this done? It's done on the very last day of the sprint. Okay. So literally the last day, if you have a 10-day sprint, it's done on day 10. And usually right before the retrospective, what happens is you do the review of the product, then the product owner and the clients leave, and then the team continues on with the retrospective. Okay. You don't want to delay it. You really want to do it inside because there's this whole idea of rhythm. I think Andy might have talked about rhythm the other night. Yep. We also call that cadence. Okay. Don't delay it. And it's 1 hour per week of sprint. Okay. So just as an interesting aside, someone asked me for credit for this course the other day, and they brought up their calendar on their computer from their work calendar. And this is an example of a person who's doing a Scrum development as a dev team member. And you can see here that it's a 10-day sprint, so 2-week sprint. So here you can see this must be the first day of the sprint because on Wednesday, they do a sprint planning for, what is that, basically the morning, so 2.5 hours, okay? And they have a daily Scrum every morning at 10 a.m. They have something called a quick chat amongst team. I'm not quite sure what that is, but it must be something to do with keeping the team connected, okay? And then if you look through here, after the the start of the first week, you hear backlog refinement here and another backlog refinement down here at the bottom, okay? And again, daily stand-ups every day, okay? And then every second day, they have a quick chat amongst team. Does that make sense? Oh, the other thing, at the end of a sprint, you can see here, sprint review and the retrospective here. Okay, so you can see sprint day 1 is the Wednesday here. It goes through the week, every day having daily stand-ups. 2 days, you spend an hour and a half refining the backlog. And then at the end of the sprint, you do a sprint review and the sprint retrospective. I don't like chairs. Yeah. All right. Does that make sense to everyone? One of the comments I heard a few people grumbling about when we were doing all these exercises is this is over-managed and so much process. The reason you see so much process is because you're sitting in the room just doing the process. If you were doing this in a development environment, you can see the calendar here is mostly empty. This is a really nice team, right? There's nothing in here other than space to do their work, okay? Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Prince 2. All right, so sprint review versus retrospective. Sprint review, you're verifying the increment against the definition of done. Verify increment components against acceptance criteria. And we sort of half talked about this stuff. Definition of done is sort of the big picture things, like what are the big things that have to be done for a definition of done to be ticked off? And quite often acceptance criteria is almost like a user story level set of criteria that ticked off, and they're specific to the user story, for example. The people there are the team plus the product owner plus the Scrum Master plus the stakeholders. So everyone's involved in that. When that meeting ends, you generally kick out the product owner and the stakeholders, and then you have a retrospective. Retrospectives driven by the team trying to improve their processes. No, only at the end of, Amy asked, is the retrospective only done at the end of the sprint or daily, like the daily scrum? No, it's only done at the end of the sprint. Okay. All right, is everyone okay with the idea of a sprint review and a retrospective being very different? Yep. One is sort of reflection. So the retrospective is a reflection on how the team went. And the other part is the advertising back out to the client to say what you've done and getting feedback back. So that's the difference between sprint review and retrospective. Who should be, what should be in the meeting? So this is like an agenda. Yep, feedback, yep. Yeah, sprint review is about the product itself and getting client feedback on it and getting client feedback on anything else that needs to be done. All right, so what should be in the meeting? Welcome the stakeholders, the usual sort of stuff when you start a meeting with external people. Review agenda done by the product owner. Most of these things are done by the product owner except the presenting the product increment. That's done by the dev team. Notice the Scrum Master, sometimes in these things, the Scrum Master will do that presentation, but personally I think it's better if the dev team, they have more ownership than the Scrum Master. Get feedback from the stakeholders on the product increment, so from the product, and the product owner runs that, and then present the current product backlog to the customers. Okay, and then get feedback from the stakeholders on the product backlog. Okay, is everyone okay with that? That's a sort of typical sequence that you would have in a sprint review. Okay. All right. And that's pretty much sprint reviews. It's straightforward. You ask the question, the devil's in the detail, of course, and that comes with practice. Any other questions on sprint reviews? Does this make sense to everyone? What is Agile? No documentation, right? That is a joke, just in case anyone wants to quote me on that. Okay, all right. So let's have a look at cadence. This is really, really interesting. There's different names for this. Is tempo, rhythm, cadence. They're all roughly the same thing. Okay, and it's the way you get the team to be have a very predictable daily sequence of events, a very predictable sprint, a very predictable project, so that everything is on a beat. Does that make sense? So that once you get this cadence working, it's nice for the team because they know what to expect. They know when things are due. They can plan for it. They know that you can't break the cadence of the team. So things have to be within the bounds that you set. Okay. So the cadence, rhythm, tempo, you'll see these all the time, right? And I think I saw Andy's slides and he calls it rhythm. Did he? I think he called it rhythm, right? Yep. Okay. It's good team has a predictable workflow, and really that's what it comes down to: a consistent output, and most important, no crunch time burn. If you look at other development processes, you have this thing where the stress just constantly builds up to the end, where everyone's burning out, quitting, you're losing team members, very unhappy people, right? The whole idea of having this cadence is so that it's a smaller increment and everything gets done on the right time. Everything has to fit into whatever time box that you've got. And we know that we're going to deliver. So if we went back to that schedule, this guy here knows that every second Wednesday, there's a product increment delivery. And that doesn't change. See, it's a repeating element in here, right? Okay. So what that means is that we know that every fortnight. Well, that's Cooper just asked, what if different developers have different amount of storyboards they can do? And that's a really good question, because story points are only relevant to the team that created them. That's why you can't go, oh, let's just grab the number of story points team B does, because they didn't map the story points into the product backlog. So they don't use the same concept of what 1 point means right down at the base level of in their brain, right? So that's why when you do story point calculations, you do it as a whole development team, okay? And that's a really good question, right? If someone said, why can't you transfer story point values between teams? What would the answer be? Anyway,
because everyone works differently in different pace, Stu?
Yeah, different pace. Also, one story point for one team might not be the same. So if people want to post, what was the velocity of their team, the predicted velocity of their teams last week? Different scale. Yeah, perfect, Rebecca. Just everyone put in the team's velocity, predicted velocities from last week. Just in the chat. Can you remember what they were? They're pretty close. Okay, if your team members already put it up, don't put it up again, because I reckon that's two people in the same team. 50, 84, 70, 75, 99. You're just 80-ish. I saw numbers between 40. No, someone had 20. 20 through to one of the people in 9 a.m. class, one of the groups had 20, and other people had, well, someone had 99 there. So you see that those numbers are not the same currency, right? 42, 20. Yeah, that's very, well, no, I mean, it depends on how big they took the story points to be, right? So that their currency might not translate to your currency of your numbers. Okay. Now, everyone here has varying numbers, right? Between 20 and 99 that I've just seen on the screen here. And it's because when you did the calculations of how long something would take, that was still in your head when you did the predicted velocity. So you can't go to team A and say, well, how many points did you have? Let's just use that for all our teams. Okay. It just doesn't work that way. It's I think I said to a few teams, it's like yours is 65 widgets, another one's 22 kittens. You just can't, the numbers aren't comparable. Does that make sense to everyone? Yep. Oh, okay, hang on. Someone just wrote some text. It just went off the screen. I was thinking more like developers in the same time. Those are able to work faster than, yes, that's true. And you generally go with the conservative value. And also when you're picking up user stories, the people who are faster might pick up the more complex ones, and that sort of balances the team out. So Cooper was just saying that even on the same team, you have difference in skills. Very, very correct. But what you can do in the team is you can shuffle work around inside the team. All right. Everyone okay with that? Okay, I think I've already asked that question. So yeah, well, if you've got a senior program, well, let's say a more experienced program, because you don't generally like having people called senior or junior in a team, although it does happen. But someone with a bit more experience might pick up the more complex one so that you even your workload out. But on the same token, you don't want to take opportunities away from your junior programmers or the new programmers to get skills. So you sort of want to balance those two things out. Don't give them something that's going to take them a month to do, but on the other hand, you want to stretch them a little bit. And most people who love programming want to actually have a bit of a challenge. They don't want to be doing drudge work. So in a lot of cases, you've actually got to push them back down a little bit more than anything. Yeah, exactly, Nico. All right, so let's keep going. Get back down to the slide here. All right. Okay, so cadence. It's around, look, to me, cadence is around having this predictable workflow and stopping stress building up. If no. Okay. if I was to look at a waterfall style design process, you'll see that the graph of time versus stress will continue to rise towards the end of the project, and at the end of the project, the stress is high. But if you look at the way Agile Scrum works, is you get a bit of an increase on each sprint. As you get towards the end of the sprint, there is a bit of stress, but it's nowhere near as high as the as the waterfall one, because you're doing smaller tasks. So typical uni course, yeah. All right, so cadence is around keeping that predictable workflow. So this is the interesting thing, is the actual beat changes depending on what type of agile process you're using, right? So a pure Scrum is called a time boxed, and we talk about time boxed all the time. We try to block everything into single unit type time boxes, right? One of the rules for Scrum, and it's not the same for other ones, is all user stories must fit into a single sprint. So if you've got a user story that's too big for one sprint, you have to break it down into smaller user stories, okay? And so that means that we know that on that Wednesday, that Tuesday afternoon, we know that at the end of that Tuesday afternoon, everything's delivered, we've done, we move on to the next project. And that's appreciated by a group of developers, right? That you've done it, you move on, you do the next sprint, done, move on to the next one. Kanban is a bit different. Oh, so we call that kind of a metronome. So it's basically a ticking. Every 2 weeks, tick, tick, tick. And it's to keep the team working nice and at a reasonable pace and not being stressed. Kanban is more complex because they actually have planning and releases are actually decoupled from the sprint. So what happens is that you might have a release schedule that goes across multiple sprints, okay? And so it's almost like you've got 2 beats going. You've got a beat for the sprints, and then you've got a beat for the releases, or a beat for the some sort of requirements process or something like that. So you end up having multiple beats on top of each other, still consistent, still run, but it's more like a drummer, more complex. Does that make sense? And so the cadence of a Kanban style agile approach is a more complex beat, but it's still a regular beat, but it might have a couple of different drum beats in it as well. Yeah, kind of, yeah. So yeah, like a regular one, yep. So whatever approach you have, the idea is to build in a predictable process or a predictable pattern that everyone knows, okay? And that way people can plan around that, saying, no, I have to get this done by this date. This is the most important thing. I have to do this, okay? All right. For the development team, predictable work, less stress, believe it or not, because you can plan right out and say, no matter what happens, I know the sprint will end on this day. You're not going to have managers moving the deadline up or back or whatever. We know that that sprint will be that long. We know that we're going to have to make it for that date. Less stressful because we're not half expecting them to change it on us. All your decision making is done around making sure that you keep to the beat. Okay. For the customer knows that a product increment or a release will be on a certain date or a certain time, and they can rely on it, and they can plan their marketing or rollouts or whatever they've got to do around those specific dates. Okay, so it's actually good all the way around. My thing about it is I think it reduces stress. Okay, so the cadence, getting a good cadence is actually really good for keeping the team happy, essentially. Is everyone okay with that? Cool. All right, a couple other things. A few people asked about why are there artifacts. Oh, look, Maxwell just asked, wait, is this why use Scrum or why use Kanban? Look, there are advantages and disadvantages to each one, but it really comes down to if you have a look, for example, on that one about the idea Kanban can have user stories that go across multiple ones. That might suit certain types of projects, for example. My experience is that most choices are based on almost like a religious fervor for a particular approach that the company has, or the person is doing the process engineering does, say, oh, Kanban's the one way we have to do it. I don't have any. I think Scrum is better for when you're first learning to do this because it's simpler. And if you look at Scrum in mature organizations, it actually has lots of Kanban stuff in it. Because what happens is that they start with Scrum and then they go, oh, this doesn't work. Kanban does this. Let's move this in. So, for example, ATO's ATO actually has a layer above sprints called release schedules, and the release schedules are very similar to Kanban style. So you really end up modifying it to what your teams want to do to get the job done, essentially. Does that make sense, Max? Yeah, cool. All right, so other topics. I had a few people asking why, in particular, burn down charts aren't considered Scrum artifacts, and really comes down to one thing: is they came out after Scrum was built, and so they call them auxiliary or additional artifacts. Very, very common. We talked about burn down charts last week, right? I think. Pretty sure we've talked about burn down charts last week. Is that right? Yep, cool. All right. There's another one called a burn up chart. It's literally exactly the same thing, except the chart goes the other direction. So as you get work done, the chart goes upwards. It really, to me, it doesn't really matter. Okay. Yeah, Smokey the Bear. Are you American, Nico? Oh, okay. So burn down chart, actually, let me see if I can grab one. Do you guys see that? Okay, so this is a burn down chart. So this is just a mock-up one I was using to explain to someone how it works, and I think I also used it for the slides. Here's the story points that we allocated to the user story. That's the person we allocated to the user story. Okay. Yep. Okay. And so as we put stuff in, as we work on things, you can see how the team's going relative to each day on the sprint. And this is a 10-day sprint burn down. Okay. And a burn up chart, basically the charts to flip the other way and it goes upwards rather than downwards. Okay, cool. All right, let me switch back to desktop 2. Okay. An impediment log is pretty obvious. It's just a list of burn down charts are automatic in Jira. In fact, I think one of the exercises I got you doing is just having a quick play with them just so you know they exist. So you can actually go in, and if you're putting the updates into the system where you're dragging across, when you drag a task into the done, the burn down jumps up, and you can actually see, sorry, burn up chart, I think they do. So that you can actually see it go up. Okay. So you can automate all that process anyway as people do everything. Okay. All right, an impediment log is essentially just a list of things that are blocking you. It's something you can go back to and look at as a team to actually figure out, perhaps in the retrospective, to see if you can figure out ways of overcoming them. And the last one is a velocity chart, which is really about how many story points people get done on every sprint. So how many story points the team gets done on each sprint, so that you can actually get a fact-based number of story points that are achievable by the team. Does that make sense? That's kind of the main artifacts that I could think of. Is everyone okay with that? Yep. And a lot of this stuff is automatic in Jira. So in the first session, I actually get you to go in and switch the reports on. There's a whole bunch of reports in there you can have a play with and see what they all do. And really, I just did it so that you knew where to look for them if you have to use them later. Okay, cool. What was the last thing? I think there's one more thing I wanted to do here. Oh, how do we know we're done? And I keep coming back to this because it's actually really important. If you, when you guys were working on your user stories, and I said, well, this is true when, you really were talking about either acceptance criteria or definitions of done, okay? There's no single way of looking at this, but a nice way to do it is think of definition of done to be attached to a sprint or the entire project. Mainly sprints, because entire projects, the definition of done for an entire project is generally stylistic stuff like UX review or things like that. So definition of done for a sprint might be, we know we've actually successfully achieved this sprint when we tick off these things. Yeah, Ronan just asked the question I was about to get to. So definition of done is the higher level requirements. And there are more general criteria. So for example, cyber security audit has been completed on the router configuration might be, a definition of done for something might be a cybersecurity scan of the entire network might be done, would be the high level definition of done. But an acceptance criteria for the configuration of perhaps a router in a facility might be for this user story, which was to roll out the router for this particular area or this particular building, was to do the cybersecurity test on that. Okay. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, Nico. Generic minimal requirements to complete something is a definition of done. And a user story is a acceptance criteria. Yeah, could definition of must not crash. I guess so. Yeah, that would be a high level one, and that would be possibly part of the quality assurance review. Acceptance criteria, yes, if someone specifically wanted that from the client side, then you have to put that in, and that'd be an acceptance criteria. Yep. So Nico suggested a definition of done must not crash, and acceptance criteria must have a dark mode. Okay. All right. What else is there? Okay. I think that's the main stuff. Is everyone okay with that? And that's everything I can fit in 5 weeks. Does this make what we went through, does this make sense to everyone?
Yes, Stu, done well.
All right. And look, I'll be super happy if you come out understanding how to do Scrum. And between now and Andy's course, for the people who are doing Andy's course, you should really have a good grasp on how to do this as a team. And it's Scrum and Agile are the dominant development process, especially for software developments, but it's right across to, it's in networking, for example, but it's right out into, education, and they use it for everything. So if you can get your head around this is a nice process. And, we're using Jira, which is the software one, but if you're doing a project management, more project management type stuff, you'd use Asana. But if you look at the Asana next to Jira, they're almost the same. Oh, that's a good question, Josh. Well, you should really know the acronyms because they get used a lot. Kunwa is asking about impediment. So an impediment log is just a list of things that slowed the team down. And a velocity chart is how many user story points did the team achieve on each sprint. So essentially what happens is you get a graph of how much the team got done on each one. How many acronyms are there? There's PBI, SBI, PBL, SBL, PO, SM. Let me just think. So there is PO, SBL. That's the ones I can think of the top of my head. Have I used any others? Yep, PBI is product backlog item. Yep. ROI, yeah. ROI, yep. DOD. No, I didn't think that's one for us. ROI, DOD was another couple that someone just posted. I think that's it, isn't it? It seems like a lot because I use them all the time, but I don't think there's a large number of them. Roy said, I initially thought Scrum was an acronym because it was a strange word. Yeah, it's a strange Queenslander word from rugby. Yeah, no, Jack, I agree with you. It's a weird sort of thing. I think they just wanted to keep 3 letters. Oh no. No, I just thought it would be a good thing to do. Sorry, Matthew Corse just asked, is shutdown mode a standard agile procedure? No, not really. I just thought it'd be a good exercise to do after working together for 5 weeks, to have people leave a little bit of feedback for each other. Oh, by the way, I will be asking you guys to do a Spark Plus review. I think you've done them before, right? I thought you did one with Kirsten. No, it's Kirsten Wallstrom in data. What is it? Design Thinking Studio. Repressed memory. Was it that bad though? It basically is a website you go onto and oh, I see, Matt. I see. Oh, okay. Yeah, because I a lot of the skills that Kirsten's teaching are sort of useful, right? Working in teams and stuff like that. I mean, it's a tricky thing and you've got to go through it at some point. Oh, yeah. Alway, yes, everything that we've covered in the workshops, in the lecture, in the readings, and in the videos. The next time someone asks that, everyone reply to them, all right? Okay, so any other questions about anything in the course, apart from the governance thing? I still haven't got all the details on that yet. But anyway, so I'm going to ask you guys to do a Spark Plus review. You're just taking the piss, Victor. I think so. I think it is a hurdle. Someone checked it and said it was. I'd be honestly surprised that the people that are attending these lectures did badly if they're attending the workshop as well. Yeah, actually, I've been trying to figure out how to do a SUP because the SUPs are actually not until November or something. So I've got to figure out if that's what I have to do or not. But yes, if you failed the course due to the exam, you would probably get a SUP if you passed everything else. Nico, there's not a lot of readings though, right? I tried to keep them as short as I could. I mean, there's two longer ones, which is the Scrum Guide and the Agile Manifesto, I thought, but everything else is, I tried to keep it short as possible. Someone just asked, you said you'll take a Spark review. When's that? I'm thinking of adding it to the end of the session. So the last point in the end of the first session, people can then do it then. You don't have to do it in class. You can do it afterwards, but we do need everyone to do them. It's like a review of the members of your team. Amy asked, "What is a Spark review?" It's a review of everyone, a review of all your teammates. So you give them feedback. Thanks, Alex. I was hoping someone would do that. Yep, probably the same system. I'll send an email out. I just wanted to do the lecture first before I sent the email with instructions. All right. Any other questions? The Diablo 2 remake? Oh, maybe. I used to love that, playing that game. Darren asked, what's my favorite team? Actually, I have to say I'm super impressed with this course. The amount of people who engaged were really good. More character. Oh, pre-workshop activity. Rebecca, yeah. Okay, so because we can't do any of the dev work because this course doesn't really require you to do any dev work, a lot of times you got allocated something that in the last session you would have got allocated some user story to complete. What I want you to do is just sketch up what that might have looked like on paper. If it was a user interface, easy, that's all. Does that make sense, Rebecca? It's literally just sketching up something so that you can use it as part of the sprint review. Yeah, because each one of you had a part of that project and I wanted you to all do your bits. Yep, cool. It's not meant to be, it's not marked other than effort that you put into it. So don't make it unusable, but it's really there for one reason, and that's because the sprint review, we've got to have something sitting in the middle of the team, right? And so I can't get you to write the code, but what I can do is get you to sketch up what you were trying to achieve. Cool. All right. Any other questions? Did I miss any? They were flying past for a second there. Other than the favorite Agile team. Okay. All right. So I've seen 6 people have bailed already. Well, it's 10 o'clock, so don't blame them. All right. If there's no further questions, I'll stop the recording.